I mean, imagine taking a real-life serial killer, someone who literally terrorized a city just a few decades prior, right, while the families of the victims are still alive, and turning him into this stylish, gliding phantom in a funfair haunted house.
Right.
In 1924, a film did exactly that, and you cannot just sit there, swirling your drink like some grand objective arbiter of film history and tell me that the aesthetic ambition of that choice, the sheer visual audacity of Waxworks, isn't an absolute triumph. It is properly genius. I mean, it is visually breathtaking.
You're joking. It is a complete shambles.
A shambles.
Yes, complete shambles. You are utterly blinded by the aesthetic here, mate. You're looking at some nice shadows, a few clever camera tricks, and you are completely forgiving the fact that the actual narrative structure of the thing is just falling apart at the seams.
Oh, that is so unfair.
Look, just because a film is old, right? Just because it was released in Weimar, Germany in 1924, doesn't automatically mean it gets a free pass as some flawless masterwork.
Yeah.
It is a bit overhyped, and frankly, structurally and narratively, it's completely disjointed.
It's not disjointed. This is an anthology. It is visionary.
It's messy.
Look, listening, you've got to hear this. Just pull up a chair right here at the table. We are currently in the middle of tearing our hair out over Paul Leni's 1924 silent film Waxworks, or Des Wachsfigurenkabinett, if we're being historically proper about it.
Which we should be.
And we are violently arguing about whether it is actually the cinematic masterpiece everyone claims it is, or if a film's aesthetic brilliance excuses its messy reality.
Because it is smoke and mirrors. It is a carnival trick dressed up as high art. That's all it is.
It is magic. Look, we're not doing polite, sanitized summaries today. Absolutely not.
Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
We are going to dig into the historical grit, right? The political context it supposedly ignores and the actual messy physical reality of this film, because this film is an epic undertaking.
It's big, I'll give you that.
We are talking about a massive physical production, an absolute behemoth of early cinema. It was 2,500 meters of film. 2,147 meters, my mistake. Let's get the facts exactly right before you have a go at me again.
Oh, I will have a go at you regardless, mate, because your entire premise is flawed from the jump. You're reading straight from the book's grandest, most sweeping claims without even interrogating them.
I am reading the text. The book explicitly states that Waxworks is the final chord of the demonic expressionist trend in German cinema.
Final chord.
Yes. And I want us to really unpack what that actually means. Think about that timeline. It started with The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a film which completely shattered how people thought about set design.
Now, Caligari is brilliant.
Right. Caligari proved that you didn't have to build a realistic room, You could build a room that looked like a panic attack. Sharp angles, painted shadows, a world that reflects the psychological terror of the characters. And the book argues that this entire movement culminates here with Waxworks.
Which is a massive stretch.
It returns to those highly stylized, deeply atmospheric, entirely artificial sets. I mean, Polidori wasn't just a director. The book literally calls him a magician of the screen.
The magician, please.
Hear me out. He created a poetic atmosphere that no one else was touching at the time. He understood space and shadow better than anyone.
Hold on a second. You are conflating visual flair with narrative substance. Let's actually look at Caligari for a moment, since you brought it up.
I knew you'd do this.
Well, Caligari was a genuine, terrifying metaphor for the popular mood in post-war Germany. It was about authority. It was about hypnosis, a society being sleepwalked into madness and murder by a tyrant. It had immense political and psychological weight.
Yes, of course.
The sets in Caligari were jagged because the psyche of the narrator was jagged. Now look at Waxworks. What is the grand driving metaphor of Waxworks? It's a funfair gimmick.
It's a stylistic showcase exploring the bounds of imagination.
It's lazy. Let's examine the actual framing device they used to justify throwing these three completely disparate stories together.
It works perfectly well.
You have a young, starving poet, played by Wilhelm Dieterle, who is a fascinating figure we'll get to later, who is hired by a funfair showman. And what is his dramatic motivation here? Is he trying to save a soul? Is he unmasking a tyrant?
He's working.
No. He has to write promotional essays about wax monsters in a tent so the showman can attract more punters.
You cannot sit there and tell me that isn't a completely dodgy, paper-thin framing device designed purely to excuse a fragmented narrative.
It is a mechanism. It's a mechanism to blur the line between reality and the stories we tell ourselves. And look at the people telling those stories.
I'm looking at them.
You are completely ignoring the talent roster here, which is staggering. It is a bloody supergroup.
A supergroup doesn't mean... Let me list them. You've got a script by Henrik Galeen, who wrote Nosferatu. You've got photography by Herman Lursky. The costumes, which are historically intricate and just utterly bizarre, are by Ernst Stern and Erno Metzner.
Right.
And the art direction is by Paul Leni himself alongside Fritz Mareschat. It is the absolute Avengers of German Expressionism.
A supergroup doesn't mean the music is actually going to be cohesive. Look at...
But I want to ask you, and you listening, right? If you had a supergroup of artists, the absolute peak of their fields in 1924, building an entire universe from scratch inside a studio, wouldn't you expect a masterpiece? How can you look at that specific list of geniuses and say the result is a shambles?
Because sometimes you put a bunch of geniuses in a room, and without a unifying narrative vision, you just get an arrogant, disjointed mess. That's why.
That's entirely unfair.
You're looking solely at the artists, but you need to look at the money and the production context. Look at the producer, Alexander Kordorov, and the studio, Neptune Film AG.
They funded it.
Do you honestly think they were sitting around in a boardroom agonizing over the final chord of demonic expressionism?
Well, maybe.
Or were they looking at the massive global financial success of recent anthology films like Fritz Lang's Destiny and thinking, right, let's do a quick cash grab riding those exact coattails?
That is an incredibly cynical reading of film history.
It's the reality of the film industry, mate. It's commercial exploitation wearing the mask of high art. And the proof that this was a fragmented commercial exercise is right there in the film itself.
Where?
Let's actually look at the first episode, the Harun al-Rashid segment.
Oh, it is brilliant. It stars Emil Jannings playing the Caliph of Baghdad. I mean, Jannings was a giant of silent cinema, and his physical performance here is just incredible.
His performance is pantomime, and this segment is absolute rubbish.
Rubbish.
It is historical vandalism. Let's actually talk about who Harun al-Rashid was, because the film completely ignores it.
He was a caliph. It's an Arabian Nights pastiche. It's not supposed to be a textbook.
He wasn't just a caliph. He was the Caliph of Baghdad from 786 to 809. He was an eminent political, military, and intellectual Muslim leader.
I know the history.
This is a man famous for his role in the Holy War against Christian Byzantium. His court was legendary across the globe for its opulence, its intellectual vigor, its massive geopolitical weight. He established the legendary House of Wisdom in Baghdad.
Which is fascinating, but...
He was a titan of world history who reshaped empires. And how does your magician of the screen, Paul Leni, treat this historical titan?
He stylizes him to fit the narrative.
He turns him into a fat, lecherous joke.
Oh, come on.
Instead of political intrigue, instead of any real exploration of what absolute power does to a ruler, the film gives us this tedious, burlesque, slapstick comedy involving a pastry cook, played again by Wilhelm Dietl and his wife.
It's comedy.
The caliph just wants to sneak out of his palace to sleep with the baker's wife, and the baker's trying to break into the palace to steal the caliph's wishing ring. It's farcical nonsense. It's a Benny Hill routine wrapped in expensive costumes.
You're completely missing the point. You are looking at this film as if you tuned into a BBC historical documentary on the Abbasid Caliphate.
I expect some respect for the source.
It's expressionism. The goal is not historical fidelity. The goal is projecting an idea into physical space. And the book, Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, explicitly notes how brilliantly Leni achieves this. It points out that the sets in this episode specifically stress oval shapes.
Yes, the sets look like giant pastries.
Exactly. But let's explain why that matters for a second. Everything is round, everything is soft, it is completely artificial and ornamental. There are no harsh corners, no imposing brutalist architecture.
Just dough.
The very geometry of the world mirrors the dough that the baker is kneading. It makes the whole thing look like a bubbly operetta. And I reckon that is a deliberate, brilliant subversion of the tyrant trope.
Subversion?
Yes. You go into a film expecting a terrifying, bloodthirsty warlord, and instead, Leni visually disarms you. He gives you a bloated, absurd, oval-shaped mockery of power. By making the architecture soft, he is satirizing the very concept of tyranny.
You can't be serious.
I am.
You are working so incredibly hard to justify a misfire. You are projecting a level of intellectual satire onto what is, fundamentally, a disjointed comedy sketch. The book itself, your own primary source, literally calls this episode the least successful of the three.
Well, they're wrong about that bit.
And it explains exactly why. Because the humor is completely at odds with the somber theme of the film. The overarching theme of Waxworks is supposed to be the horror of absolute power, the terror of the monsters in the tent.
Right.
And we start this grand exploration of terror with a sex farce in a bakery. It is tonal whiplash. You go from a creepy, shadowy Waxworks tent to a bubbly, oval-shaped operetta. It's a complete structural failure that leaves the audience totally confused about what kind of film they are watching.
Right, fine. If you want dark, if you want somber, if you want pure, unadulterated terror, let's enthusiastically shift to the second episode.
Right.
Because you cannot touch this one. Conrad Veidt playing Ivan the Terrible. This is spot on. This is pure, distilled expressionism. This is exactly what people study early cinema for.
I'll admit, the visuals in this segment are
Yes.
striking.
Striking, it's mental. It is a masterclass in visual psychology. Let's break down how it actually looks for the listener because it's vital.
Go ahead.
The sets here are completely twisted. The architecture looks like it's melting and collapsing inward, but it's the lighting that makes it genius. Herman Lursky uses this intense, high-contrast chiaroscuro.
Yes, the lighting is very aggressive.
For those not deep into art history, chiaroscuro is that aggressive battle between blinding, harsh light and pitch blackness. There are no soft grays. The shadows are so deep, they literally look like they are swallowing the actors whole.
It's very bleak.
You have these vistas of a nightmarish, contorted Kremlin that looks like it's physically pressing down on the characters. Its architecture is a panic attack. And Conrad Veidt's acting, he doesn't even look human half the time.
True.
He's all sharp angles, creeping along the walls, moving like a jagged shadow. It's the internal paranoia and madness of a tyrant physically projected onto the architecture around him.
Yes, visually, from a technical lighting standpoint, it does what it says on the tent. Lursky's cinematography is technically proficient. But once again, let's look at the historical reality versus this brilliant psychological projection.
Oh, please, not again.
The actual Ivan Grozny, who ruled from 1530 to 1584, was massively complex.
Here we go with the history textbook again.
History gives art its weight. Ivan IV wasn't just a creeping ghoul in a basement. He conquered Siberia. He conquered Tartary. He literally transformed Russia from a medieval state into a massive multicultural and multi-confessional empire.
I know what he did.
He commissioned St. Basil's Cathedral to project divine, monumental power. He was a brutal, deeply paranoid autocrat, absolutely. But he was a statesman who reshaped the geopolitics of an entire continent.
And a film about his trade policies with the English would be incredibly boring.
It wouldn't be a cartoon.
The film focuses on the cruelty, which is far more cinematic and emotionally resonant, and the morbid plot they came up with is incredible. Let's look at the mechanism of torture Leni uses.
The hourglass.
Yes. The idea that Ivan's defining act of cruelty is the hourglass. He poisons his victims or has them tortured, and then he places an hourglass right in front of them so they can literally watch the exact time of their impending death slipping away, grain by grain.
It's a parlor trick.
That is brilliant, twisted, psychological horror. He isn't just killing their bodies, he is torturing their minds with the physical manifestation of time.
But it's intellectually lazy.
Yeah.
You are taking a massively complex historical figure, a man who built an empire, and reducing him to a cartoonish sadist who just likes watching sand fall while people scream in a basement.
It's about his paranoia.
It strips away all the political context of why tyrants do what they do, and then what happens in the plot? He gets caught in a court intrigue, he's tricked into thinking he's been poisoned himself, and he goes completely mad.
It's poetic justice.
The final image is him endlessly turning over his own hourglass, trapped in a loop of his own paranoia. It's just misery for the sake of it, mate. It's a haunted house ride disguised as a historical critique. It doesn't say anything profound about power. It just says, look how scary this guy is.
That is complete rubbish, mate. It's expressionism. It's not meant to be a geopolitical documentary. You don't go to Paul Ladini to learn about the socioeconomic reforms of 16th century Russia.
You should expect some depth.
You go to experience the visceral, suffocating feeling of absolute terror. It's about projecting internal madness outward. It doesn't matter what Ivan did for the infrastructure of Siberia. What matters to the narrative of the film is the paralyzing fear he instilled in his subjects. And the film captures the mechanics of that fear perfectly.
It captures a caricature of fear, not the reality of it.
The hourglass isn't just a prop, it's a metaphor for inevitability. It's brilliant.
But fine, if we are abandoning all historical responsibility, all nuance, for the sake of vibes and lighting, let's look at the third episode.
Ah, yes. The final nightmare. Werner Krauss playing Jack the Ripper. This is where even you have to admit the film achieves exactly what it set out to do.
Do I?
The book itself, our battlefield text, Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, calls this section brief but excellent and explicitly says it is organically cinematic.
It is remarkably brief, I'll give it that. It's practically a vignette compared to the other two.
But it is breathtaking. Let's break down the plot and the mechanics for a second, because this is where the framing device pays off. The young poet, exhausted from writing all these essays about Harun al-Rashid and Ivan the Terrible, finally falls asleep in the wax tent.
Because of course he does.
And he hallucinates. He dreams that he and the showman's daughter are fleeing through the fun fair, and they are being stalked by Jack the Ripper. And the technical wizardry Leni employs here is just off the charts for 1924.
I will concede the technique is advanced for the era.
Advanced. It's revolutionary. The physical, grounded location of the fun fair completely dissolves into a totally unreal psychological space.
Yes, the sets sort of fall away.
Explain how they did it, because it's fascinating. Leni uses multiple exposures. He literally runs the film through the camera multiple times so that different layers of imagery overlap. He uses lighting effects that create literal translucent phantoms roaming around the Expressionist sets.
That's a clever use of the camera.
The Ripper isn't even portrayed as a physical man with a knife. He's this gliding, inevitable shadow that haunts the edges of the frame. It's a bad dream continuing into waking hours. The audience experiences the disorientation of a nightmare perfectly translated onto celluloid.
Oh, hold on. I will actually give you this one point.
Finally.
As a purely aesthetic exercise, a demonstration of camera trickery, it is highly effective. The way Leni escalates the sense of alarm and fear through pacing and those overlapping images is technically impressive. But, and this is massive, unavoidable, but we need to talk about the context of what he's actually depicting.
You're going to ruin a brilliant sequence with history again, aren't you?
History matters. Reality matters. Jack the Ripper wasn't a mythical boogeyman from a fairy tale. Jack the Ripper was the moniker for the unidentified, very real killer of 5 prostitutes in Whitechapel, a severely impoverished area of London, between September and November of 1888.
Yes, but by 1924, it was already becoming folklore. It was decades ago.
Was it? When Waxworks was released in 1924, 1888 wasn't ancient history. It was barely 35 years prior. There were people alive sitting in those cinemas who clearly remembered the terror of the Autumn of Terror.
I suppose.
There were families directly affected by those brutal, very real murders. The poverty and desperation of Whitechapel was a real social crisis, and Paul Leni decides to turn a real, brutal, misogynistic serial killer into a cool, aesthetic phantom in a fun fair dream sequence. Don't you think that is a bit morally dodgy?
I think it's exploring the mythology of terror. The Ripper had already become a symbol of urban anxiety.
I think it's exploiting recent trauma for a cheap cinematic thrill. It takes the grisly, horrifying reality of 5 murdered, marginalized women and completely erases them.
It's not about them.
Exactly. It turns their killer into a stylish boogeyman purely to chase a fictional poet around a tent for 5 minutes of screen time. It is aestheticizing real-world violence in a way that is incredibly irresponsible.
I want to throw this to you listening right now, because this is a massive question about art and narrative responsibility. Think about it. How do you feel when modern films or true crime shows turn real-life horrific tragedies into highly stylized aesthetic nightmares?
This happens all the time now.
Is it brilliant filmmaking because it captures the psychological terror of the event and processes it through art? Or is it a bit distasteful to turn real victims' trauma into entertainment? Because that is exactly the line that Waxworks was dancing on in 1924.
Exactly. It's a question of artistic responsibility.
Yeah.
Do you serve the truth of the event, or do you serve the lighting plot? And this is where I think the book, Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, gives the film far, far too much of a pass.
The book is definitive. It's a foundational text for understanding early cinema.
The book says, and I quote directly, that Waxworks makes no reference to current events and is pure fantasy. How on earth can a film historian write that with a straight face?
Because it is fantasy.
How can you feature Ivan the Terrible, an autocratic dictator known for state-sanctioned torture, and Jack the Ripper, a modern serial killer, in a film released in Weimar, Germany, a society actively recovering from a catastrophic, traumatizing war and inching toward massive political extremism, and claim it has no reference to current events?
It's a funfair film.
To say it's pure fantasy is utterly naive, The anxiety of the Weimar Republic is baked into every single twisted shadow of this film.
That's rubbish. You are projecting modern, hyper-analytical frameworks onto a film that was simply trying to push the boundaries of visual storytelling.
Yeah.
You are asking a 1924 silent film to be a sociological thesis.
I'm asking it to be self-aware.
Paul Leni was a visual pioneer. You have to understand his background. He came from Max Reinhardt's theater. In Reinhardt's theater, the set wasn't just a backdrop where actors stood. The set was treated as a psychological character itself.
Yes, I know Reinhardt.
Leni brought that exact philosophy to the cinema. He knew how to use space, how to carve emotion out of shadow, better than anyone working at the time. He was on the verge of redefining cinema globally.
Or he was just very good at repeating theater tricks on film.
No, listen to the trajectory. He moved to Hollywood shortly after Waxworks. He made films like The Cat and the Canary, which basically invented the haunted house genre as we know it.
That was decent, yes.
If he hadn't tragically died prematurely in 1929, he would be universally recognized today as one of the undisputed titans of the medium, right alongside Hitchcock or Lang.
Or he would have just made more over-stylized B-movies that prioritize set design over cohesive storytelling. We don't know.
You are impossible. Look at the legacy the film left behind. Look at the people who learned from it. Wilhelm Dieterle, the guy who plays the poet and the pastry cook, the guy you dismissed as part of a lazy framing device, literally went on to become one of the leading directors of American film biographies.
Dieterle was talented, yes.
He directed the life of Emile Zola. He took the pedigree, the visual education, the sheer mechanical understanding of filmmaking that he got on the set of Waxworks and brought it to Hollywood. Waxworks isn't just a film, it is an absolute roadmap for the evolution of cinema. It trained a generation.
Dieterle succeeding later as a director doesn't retroactively make Waxworks a cohesive film. It just means Dieterle is smart enough to look around the set, learn how the cameras work, and learn from Leni's narrative mistakes.
Oh, whatever.
You cannot judge a film by what its actors did a decade later. Let's judge Waxworks on what it actually is, an anthology of completely different clashing styles.
It's variety.
You have bubbly operettas, you have agonizing pure expressionism, and you have camera trick phantasmagoria, all jammed together with a weak, commercially motivated framing device. It's wildly uneven.
It is an anthology of the expressionist treatment of terror. It is supposed to be varied. It shows range. It shows absolutely everything the German cinema industry was physically and artistically capable of doing in 1924.
It shows what happens when you don't have an editor.
It's a bloody masterpiece of atmosphere, and if you can't see the value in that, if you only care about historical dates and perfectly linear plots, you're just being stubbornly contrarian.
I am being analytical. I am asking the film to earn its running time. You're just being seduced by the lighting and the lore. It's a fragmented, disjointed shambles.
Well, we're never going to agree on this.
No, we aren't. But I will leave you and anyone listening who has stuck with us through this argument with this one final unresolved thought. It's something that the book touches on but never fully answers.
Go on then.
You really have to wonder. If Paul Leni hadn't tragically died in 1929, if he had lived to see the sound era, to work with dialogue, and to mature as a filmmaker, would Waxworks actually be remembered today as his crowning achievement? Or would we look back at it as just an awkward, messy stepping stone? A highly visible experiment where a young, ambitious director threw every single visual trick he had at the wall purely to see what stuck.
You're impossible. You really are. Look, if you want to stop being a lazy enthusiast and actually judge the historical grit, the visual genius, and the narrative structure for yourself, grab a copy of Cinema, The Magic Vehicle. Read the text. Look at the stills. Understand the context. Decide for yourself if it's a shambles or a masterpiece. We're done here.